Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with all of you. My name is Marissa Reyes, and I have the honor of being the Chief Learning and Engagement Officer for Crystal Bridges and the Momentary, and it is such a pleasure to welcome you tonight. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Tonight's conversation will include opportunities for audience engagement. So if you have a question or a comment, you may submit them at any time using the QR code that you've been seeing on the screen. Just take your camera on your phone, point it at the screen, and follow the link to our online form, and we'll address some of those questions at the end of the night. Before we get started, I'd like to begin this program with our Indigenous Peoples Acknowledgement, recognizing the museum's role as settlers and guests in the Northwest Arkansas region. We acknowledge the Caddo, the Quapaw, and Osage, as well as the many indigenous caretakers of this land and water. We appreciate the enduring influence of the vibrant, diverse, and contemporary cultures of indigenous peoples. We are conscious of the role in colonization that museums have played. As cultural institutions, we have a responsibility to engage in the dismantling of historical and systemic invisibility of indigenous peoples past, present, and future. We choose to intentionally hold ourselves accountable to appropriate conversation, representation, connection, and education to facilitate a space of measurable change. Tonight's conversation is made possible through the generous support of our Talks and Lectures series sponsors. We are especially grateful to Andrea Albright and Demara Teitzer for their belief in the power of public dialogue and storytelling that helps bring meaningful moments like this to life. And we also extend our thanks to Arkansas PBS for their partnership in live streaming tonight's conversation, allowing us to reach even more people beyond these walls. Now, as an American art museum, Crystal Bridges believes that storytelling and dialogue are among the most powerful tools that we have to connect, to question, and to imagine a more empathetic and informed future. We are proud to feature notable American voices like Katie Couric right here in Northwest Arkansas, bringing important topics like wellness, the arts, and community into both personal and national conversations. Events like tonight's are more than just presentations. They are invitations to all of us to engage deeply, reflect, and be part of the evolving story of our time. We hope this evening sparks conversations that resonate beyond these walls and ripple throughout our communities. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce two remarkable women who embody the spirit of this work. Katie Couric is a trailblazer, an award-winning journalist, and a #1 New York Times best-selling author for her memoir titled Going There, published in 2021. She is also co-founder of Stand Up to Cancer. Since its launch in 2008, Stand Up to Cancer has raised almost $800 million to support cutting-edge Those funds have gone to support cutting-edge collaborative science, and its research has contributed to 9 new FDA-approved therapies. In 2017, she founded Katie Couric Media, which has developed a number of editorial media projects and purpose-driven brand content that addresses important social issues such as gender equality, environmental sustainability, and mental health. Katie Couric's accolades are many. She was the first woman to solo anchor a network evening newscast. She has won multiple industry awards, has been on many lists, including Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, and has also received numerous awards for her cancer advocacy work. She has been honored by both the Harvard and Columbia Schools of Public Health, as well as the American Cancer Society and the American Association of Cancer Researchers. In addition to her book Going There, Katie Couric is also the author of 2 children's books, as well as the book titled The Best Advice I Ever Got, Lessons from Extraordinary Lives. Joining Katie tonight in conversation is Olivia Walton. Olivia is a champion for the arts, women's economic empowerment, and maternal health across America's heartland. She has served as chairperson of the board at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art since succeeding Alice Walton in 2021. Olivia also sits on the Momentary Council and leads the vision for Oz Art NWA, a regional collection of public art installed both indoors and out. She is the founder and CEO of Ingeborg Investments and Ingeborg Initiatives, named in honor of her maternal grandmother, which drive progress in family-friendly policy, women's health, and financial security. Olivia is also the co-founder of the Heartland Summit and a Henry Crown Fellow, class of 2025. She lives in Bentonville, Arkansas with her husband, Tom, and their 3 kids, and their black Labrador Snacks, who you may occasionally see on the trails here at Crystal Bridges. With that introduction, we are thrilled to bring Katie and Olivia tonight for a conversation. Please join me in giving them both a very warm welcome.
Katie, this is so fun. Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all so much for coming. And that's quite a welcome. So,
the people in this room, they don't just love you, they are the most organized people that love you because they bought their tickets the fastest. Your talk actually sold out in record time for Crystal Bridges.
Oh.
Yeah. I've truly never seen this many seats full. I had so many text messages from some of the wonderful women I work with. I see some in the front. And also from my best friend, Meryl Hermanson, who is here tonight with a very special guest, her mom, Susie, whose 81st birthday it is.
Happy birthday.
By the way, Susie also a Spence mom. Just saying.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
Okay. On a more serious note, few people have shaped modern media as profoundly and as personally as Katie Couric. For more than 40 years, Katie has been a trusted, a warm, and an insightful voice in American life. In a world that often moves faster than we can make sense of, Katie brings clarity, compassion, and courage. She helps us understand the stories around us and the stories within ourselves. And as the title of her memoir, Going There, suggests, she does not flinch in her pursuit of truth and understanding. So tonight we are going to dive into wellness, the media, and the many, many hats that Katie is wearing these days, but I thought we could start with a little bit of a lightning round, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Because everybody...
By the way, I wore my Easter suit, everybody.
You look so pretty in pink. So pretty. But everyone has this feeling that they know you because you were on in their kitchens for years and years, and everyone's head is nodding, but how well do they really know you? So, you have interviewed everybody. You've met everybody. Presidents, popes, pop stars. What is the most starstruck you've ever been?
I mean, to give you the honest answer, it's between George Clooney and Hugh Jackman. They're my free passes. My husband said, yeah.
I thought there was supposed to be one pass.
Well, whichever happens first.
Smart. Do you have a morning routine?
You know, I really don't. I have taken up Pilates because during the pandemic, my back was really bothering me. So the only routine I really have is 3 days a week. I do Pilates. I have a Pilates teacher in New York. And other than that, my routine is unfortunately lying in bed and reading my phone for about 45 minutes, which is a habit I need to break but I'm not reading junk. I'm reading articles. No, seriously. No, a few Instagram recipes now and then, because I find them mesmerizing. I love to watch people cook on Instagram, and I can, suddenly it's like 2 hours later and I haven't done anything. So that's really my routine, unfortunately.
What is the most surprisingly addictive thing you've found on social media?
The recipes.
The recipes.
Yeah. And when they don't talk and they just cut.
Yeah.
And then it sizzles in the pan, and then they mix it. And I love that. And I save so many recipes, and then I never make them. Do you all do that too? I'm like, I'm going to make that, and then I never do.
Is there an interview you're just dying to do in the future?
George Clooney. I'm kidding. Yeah, actually, I'm really excited, you guys, because I shamelessly posted this on social media. I love this show called The Pit. I don't know if anybody's watched this. I think it's such a fantastic show about doctors who I admire so deeply, and it's so realistic most of the time. I'm like this watching it, and I hear John like, oh, God. But Noah Wiley's going to do an interview with me, the star of the show. Yeah.
I'm happy to help.
I'm sounding so shallow, I'm realizing.
What else are you reading or watching these days?
The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Merriweather Post I'm reading right now, because I'm thinking about, we started a production company, and I'm thinking about trying. It's very hard right now to get anything done in Hollywood or for streamers, but we're trying to do a scripted series about Marjorie Merriweather Post because she had the most remarkable life. I highly recommend the book. And I'm watching The Pit, and I'm watching Hacks. And I'm not supposed to tell you all, but I have a cameo coming up.
What is your grandmom name?
Go-Go. So I didn't know what to be. My grandmother was Nana. My mom was Granny for my kids. And my dad's mom was grandmother, which just seemed so formal. And I was at, this kind of name droppy, but I'm going to do it anyway. I was at a cocktail party, and I was talking to Tory Burch, because, I live in New York, and I see these well-known people sometimes. And I said, she asked me, what is your grandmother name going to be? This was before Ellie had her baby. And I said, I really don't know. I want the child, we didn't know what it was going to be, to call me Katie. And she said, you can't do that. And she said, my name is Go-Go. And I said, I really like that, so I stole it. Yeah.
Okay, my last one may have been planted by your husband, but who is the best pickleball player in your family?
Without question, I am. John is such a good athlete, though. He's one of those people, he never plays, but when he does play, he crushes me. But I play a lot, and I'm really pretty good. I have a killer serve.
So last night, it was such a treat. We got to go to dinner with you, with Alice, and with Grandmom, our Grandmom. And I noticed that you ordered shrimp and grits and sweet tea. And I wondered, having grown up in Virginia, are there aspects of Southern life and culture that you feel nostalgic for, or that you think you still carry with you?
Well, I love the South. I mean, I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, which could hardly be called the South. It's a suburb of Washington, D.C. But my dad was from Dublin, Georgia, and went to Mercer in Macon, Georgia, and had the most beautiful, mellifluous, that's a good word, isn't it? Southern accent. And, he loved grits. And ham and red-eye gravy, which I never could really get into that. But, and then my mother grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. Her father was an architect and builder, and our claim to fame was that he built Warren Buffett's childhood home in Omaha. But my mom's whole family, they are from Alex City, Alabama. And so, and then my dad's family, my great-great-great-grandfather came from Brittany. Our name is actually from Brittany. Everyone thinks it's Eastern European or something, but it's Gaelic. And he was a stowaway on a ship and jumped off the coast of Pensacola, but ended up settling in Eufaula, Alabama. So I have so many Southern connections, and I lived in Atlanta when I worked for CNN. And so I have a lot of relatives who still live in Birmingham and Alex City, and my dad wrote for the Atlanta Constitution when he was younger. So I feel very, very connected to the South. I love it. And I start talking like this when I get here, and I say y'all and hey, sugar. Do you do that, Olivia?
Oh, I definitely. I use visit as a verb, which I never did in the North.
Yeah. Well, and you were saying your kids now have little Southern accents.
Again, and y'all. Again, Grandma, again. It's very, very sweet. It is hard to overstate all the barriers you have broken and all these seminal moments in your career that have been turning points in our culture and our politics. But I wonder what those experiences were like for you personally as you were telling those stories and as you were, a firsthand witness to so many of them. Were there stories that really stick out that transformed you?
I think, when I was at the Today Show, I think that was the advent of a lot of school shootings. And I have such a vivid memory of covering the shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. I was actually at a matinee, a Broadway matinee, and I got a call, you need to leave right away. And so I got on a plane, and I had a wonderful producer who was able to, I think it wasn't the next day, it might have been the next day after the shooting took place, convince a father who had lost his son, Isaiah, who was a football player at the high school, and a young man who had lost his sister, Craig Scott, his sister Rachel. And they, for whatever reason, I've always overwhelmed by people's willingness to be in this deep, profound pain and be willing to talk about it on television. I think in some ways sometimes people, I think, are in a state of shock, and sometimes I think it's to validate the life lost and to make sure people knew this person lived. And I remember we were, I guess, 2 or 3 hours early because of the West Coast, and before the 7 a.m. start time at the Today Show, it was pitch dark and it was snowing. And it was in April, actually. The anniversary of Columbine must be somewhere around this date, but I remember it was almost a spiritual experience where these two people, I don't know if anybody remembers this interview in this audience, but Michael Scholes, this big, burly African-American man, I think he had a sports team jacket. I can't remember what exactly it was. And this sort of diminutive, young, blonde, young man who must have been in 10th or 11th grade. And they just held each other's hands and kind of shared in their grief. And, it was like being a witness to something just, this combination of grief and yet connection all at once. And I just think my role there was to help them tell their story. And it's just one of those experiences I don't think I'll ever forget, being able to share that with an audience, and also knowing when to talk. And I remember touching Michael Scholl's arm. And I can't even explain it, actually, even to this day. But I thought that was a really profound personal experience for me. And it also made me very upset about gun violence in this country and the fact that this was happening and so many young people. And then, of course, I covered Sandy Hook, and that was just devastating. Of course, I knocked on someone's door, which of course you hate to do when somebody has experienced this kind of trauma. And Mark Barden, who has become a very good friend of my husband and mine now, and his wife Jackie, let us in. It was right before Christmas, and the Christmas tree was there. Their whole family had gathered, and he invited me in, which I thought was such a gracious thing to do, I think, because he knew who I was and obviously trusted me or respected me, and just opened his home to me and a camera crew. And I remember sitting down and interviewing him. And I think it really started me on a journey to try to come up with a solution for gun violence. And I think even people who believe in the right to bear arms, and I'm sure in Arkansas there are a lot of people like that, you know, to try to figure out a way to solve the problem and not have it so polarized, I think is in the best interests of everyone. And 74% of members of the NRA even support better gun laws that will prevent these kinds of things from happening. So that's just, I think, two deeply affecting moments I had professionally.
And your coverage of those events just was so important. As hard as those conversations were, I think they help everyone realize the depth of the tragedy, the seriousness of the issue. And you bring that signature humanity and heart to those incredibly hard topics. And we are all grateful for it. I told you I don't have to be unbiased anymore. Now that I can just be biased in favor of Katie Couric. I am...
That's a bias I can deal with.
Yeah. I know how hard that is to do, and I'm just amazed that you can steel yourself. And I am curious about your relationship with yourself. Do you still get nervous ahead of any interviews? And when something doesn't turn out the way you wished it had, do you beat yourself up, or how do you work with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very self-critical, although at this point in my life, I'm 68, so I give myself a little bit of grace. I know I don't look it, do I? I know what you were thinking. I'm kidding. I'm very critical. I think the only time I actually get nervous is in a live situation, because there's no room for error. If you make mistakes, you can't necessarily take them back. That's why, honestly, doing live debates is so daunting for journalists. I've never hosted a debate, but a lot of people want you to do immediate fact checking. That is almost impossible in a debate situation. So if I had to do a debate, I would totally be a nervous wreck. But I'm pretty comfortable, and I think with sort of this modern media environment, people, I think, want you to be more authentic and more natural and less kind of polished in a way that feels like people are a little bit at a distance. And so I feel pretty comfortable. And if I screw up, I say, oh, I screwed up, let me correct that, or whatever. I think people want to watch people who feel more like them and feel connected with them, like they're just regular people trying to get to the truth, honestly.
One last question sort of on this topic, because I'm just so personally curious about it. And to me, you really were the public figure that made this shift to become a woman on TV who was assertive and approachable. so much of it had been performing a conversation, but here you were with this unusual warmth and smile, willing to actually touch someone's arm in the middle of a, very, very sad conversation. So how did you navigate being serious and likable?
Well, being likable kind of came naturally for me. I'm kidding. But, listen, I had worked extremely hard to get where I was when I was offered this job. No one was more surprised on the Today Show. And I had covered the Pentagon. I had worked in local news. I'd worked at CNN when it first went on the air in 1980. And so I felt, and I think I was always very conscious that I wanted to be taken seriously. And, I think in television, and I'm sure, Olivia, you experienced this to a certain extent, especially earlier, actually, in when women were really starting to get into the business, people wanted to put you in a box. You had to be serious. Or if you were fun and funny, you couldn't be smart. And, as Walt Whitman says, we contain multitudes. We are multidimensional human beings. And I wanted to be able to freely express all these different sides of me. And so I think for me, John Chancellor wrote me a note when I got this job on the Today Show, and he said, the camera is the world's most sophisticated BS detector. And I think, I think he's right. And I think especially on a show like the Today Show where people see you in every imaginable situation. They see me flying across the plaza as Peter Pan and grilling David Duke about his racist, anti-Semitic remarks. So I think that people saw that I was multidimensional. And, there are plenty of people who don't like me. Just read my comments on Instagram. And, but and I finally got a shirt that said, I'm not for everyone. But I think just at least people, knew that I was essentially the same person on camera as I am off camera. And I think they appreciated that, I wasn't perfect and that I made mistakes and, that I was just normal, right?
So after decades on network television, you have now launched this really cool new media company. How does that feel, and how are you using your voice differently now that you are representing yourself instead of a station?
Well, I have a lot more editorial freedom, obviously, and I think it's really becoming an issue with journalism today, corporate ownership and this conflict of interest. For example, Skydance and Paramount starting, this merger at CBS. And I don't know if you all have been keeping up with the executive producer of 60 Minutes, just resigned. Are you saying that's good that he resigned? I hope you're not saying it's good he resigned. I actually wrote an essay about it in our newsletter, Wake Up Call. Please sign up, katiecouric.com, Wake Up Call. And it comes in your inbox every morning, 6 days a week. We have a team that works incredibly hard on it. But there's a lot of pressure from corporations for people to pull their punches and to not speak out when I think things need to be spoken about. And we need to speak truth to power, especially now. And so I really have a lot of latitude, and I'm able to, basically the reason John and I started this company is I love what I do. I'm so passionate about understanding the world and helping other people understand the world. And I was in an enviable position because I was a TV anchor before this massive fragmentation where, there's so much information we're inundated and accosted by every day. But I think people had formed a relationship of trust with me. So I knew linear television was declining, and I wanted to be in a place where I could meet people where they are. So whether it's on Instagram or on YouTube or on, Threads, I've given up on X because it's such a cesspool. And the people there The people there are so awful, awful. And through our newsletters, we have a newsletter called Body and Soul about health and wellness. And I'm able to get these really, I'm able to talk to experts who were, Michael McFaul, who was the U.S. ambassador to Russia, about what the hell is going on with Trump and Putin. And I'm able to talk with Larry Summers, I just interviewed, the former Secretary of the Treasury and also the former president of Harvard, about what's happening in higher education. So I'm able to unpack these issues and do it on a variety of platforms without some kind of corporate overlord telling me I can't do that. So that's extraordinarily liberating, and I'm just having so much fun, and I feel this also, now more than ever, we need an independent press. And I feel this extraordinary sense of purpose that I can help people realize, understand what's happening. Unfortunately, I can't really tell them what to do about it, because that's the number one question I get. What can we do? And all I can say is, vote and try to do things in your community at the grassroots level, and also reach out to people who have different opinions and listen to them, feel their pain, as Bill Clinton would say, and try to kind of find common ground, because it's gotten so vitriolic and so polarized. I think we are falling we're like falling apart at the seams, and I think this is not good for our country, to be at each other's throats all the time. And somehow we have to figure out how to solve these seemingly intractable problems by working together. And I would love for that to happen.
Is there a future for nonprofit news?
I think so. Look, ProPublica does great investigative work. Frontline does really extraordinary work. I'd like to think that we do important work, but we're not a nonprofit. We work with our sort of financial model, which is, I think, interesting. We saw that through the Edelman Trust Barometer and the Business Roundtable, as trusted institutions, like the media was declining precipitously, trust in companies, was actually growing. And people felt like companies wanting to do good in their communities, wanting to take a stand on certain issues, wanting to build things for people, and to say, we care about the environment, we care about sustainability, we care about gender equality, we care about equal opportunity, we care about lifting people up. What's wrong with that, by the way? And so we do storytelling. I think Walmart does that, honestly. And I have been so in awe of what has been built in this community. I know Alice says where a lot of people are involved, but let's face it, she is the visionary behind it all. And I think companies can really be a force for good. So what we do is we team up with companies like, Exact Sciences. I care deeply about colon cancer, having lost my husband when he was 42 in 1998 to the disease. And they do Cologuard. And, for some people who can't get a colonoscopy, Cologuard is a good alternative. And it's covered by insurance, it's covered by Medicaid. And so we do a lot of stories with them, not just about colon cancer, but about how to live your best life, or how to talk about death and dying. I know that sounds really like a buzzkill right now, but how we have to have the vocabulary to talk about those things with the people we love. And we worked with Ally Financial. Procter & Gamble was our very first partner. P&G is an incredible company. And, we do a whole series with them called Acts of Good, where they are really changing things on a community level, building the first LGBTQ center in rural Virginia. And, things like that. So we want to spotlight and highlight these companies and say they are part of they're part of the solution.
I want to circle back to the health conversation, but just two follow-ups on kind of near the news. Do you know which type of organizations are even more trusted than companies on that list?
No, Olivia, I don't.
Museums.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
And so that's...
I did not know that.
Yeah, and that is, we are still one of the most trusted public spaces, a place that is informing people, where people believe that we are asking questions and not telling them what to think.
That's wonderful.
Okay, so I'm really curious about actually the news you're consuming, but I am curious, I saw my brother-in-law kind of flinch on the X comment. How many people in this room check Instagram a couple times a week? How many
times
people?
a week? Was that the question?
Couple times. No, I'm just curious. I'm really curious. I'm trying to be soft about asking how many people are on X. How many people are on X? 1, 2.
I'm still on it. I just never read the comments. I'm like,
That feels healthy. That feels healthy. Are there shows, newspapers, podcasters out there that you think are doing really great work?
I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to.
Do it.
I was going to say, I really love that Joe Rogan. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, ladies. Yeah, the manosphere. Come on. No, I like The Daily, which is the New York Times podcast. I like our podcast, which is called Next Question. I hope you subscribe to that. That's the one that we do. I like what newspapers and magazines. Who do you think I am, Sarah Palin?
I take it many of you remember that moment. what,
Olivia said I could be saucy tonight.
have you spoken to her since?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I think you turned that election.
Huh?
You kind of turned that election in that interview.
It turned out.
Turned the election. I mean, that felt like a turning point.
I thought Obama should send me a bouquet of flowers
Yeah.
after that
I know.
interview. Yeah. No, honestly, I
All
said,
you asked was, what newspapers do you read?
well, I asked her a lot more than that. That just was the one that got the attention. But, listen, in all seriousness, like, I don't think anyone wants to see someone really squirm and be out of their element and out of their league in an interview like that on national television. You liked it. The lady in the third row liked it. Well, I did feel bad. I felt bad that she had been put in that situation, because she certainly was not. I really wanted to test her ability to be a critical thinker and her aggregated knowledge. And so I remember Time Magazine said it was like watching a 7th grader screw up their oral exams, but that was an insult to 7th graders and oral exams. So.
All right. It feels like the crowd is left-leaning.
My husband's going like this. I don't know why. No.
John, we're going to take a hard right turn to healthcare.
Okay, good. Okay.
Katie, you've done more than anybody. I'm going to transition. I'm going to do it. You have done more than anybody to destigmatize awareness around cancer and screening. I actually looked up how old you were when you had. When did you first get the idea to have a colonoscopy on live television?
Well, it wasn't live. I'm not.
Oh,
that
okay,
crazy. This actually, in all seriousness, my husband Jay was diagnosed when he was 41 years old, and Ellie, our daughters, Ellie, 5 and 2. Ellie and Carrie were 5 and 2, and I mean, talk about a life-shattering event. I think for many of you who have experienced cancer, it's sort of before cancer and after cancer. And during cancer, those 9 months were, I don't think there are words to describe how painful and distressing that was. I felt like every minute I had a heart around my vice, a vice around my heart rather, and it was so terrifying. So Jay, when he was diagnosed, he had stage 4 colon cancer, and it was all over his liver. And I did everything I could. We tried to find clinical trials, and anyway, that back then was a very dire diagnosis. It's still very difficult, but a lot of people are doing much better with that diagnosis. So, during the course of his illness, I felt so powerless. Like, if you're a can-do person and you think, I'll fix this, we'll figure it out, and there was no figuring it out. So, after he died, shortly after his 42nd birthday, I felt like I had to do something. And I think what I had to do was use the bully pulpit I had with, back then, millions of people were watching every day. I think many of the viewers knew what had happened. They announced it on the Today Show that Jay had died. And I just thought, I have to prevent other families from going through this. And it's such a preventable disease, Olivia. It's the number 2 cancer killer of men and women combined. But if it's caught early, there's a 92% survival rate. And people need to get screened. And I had to basically demystify and destigmatize the screening for colon cancer. And that's why I got a colonoscopy in 2000. And, I did it in my kitchen. What we didn't put on the Today Show was after my last glass of the inappropriately named Go Lightly, I threw up all over our kitchen floor. But I said, burn that tape. We're not going to show anybody that, because I didn't want to discourage. Now the prep is easier. It's not a lot of fun, but it's much easier than it was back then. But, the number of people who got screened went up 20%. And you think of that as a percentage, but you think of that's a lot of mothers and fathers and husbands and wives and sisters and brothers who, who lived. And, I think it was such a way to honor my husband, who never saw Ellie and Carrie graduate from high school or, graduate from college, or never got to take them to the father-daughter dance, which I went and complained about to our school, because in 7th grade they had this father-daughter dance, and I said, you have three kids in 7th grade who don't have fathers, and it's so painful. I think Ellie asked me if I could get Brad Pitt to take her, and I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. But the head of the school said it's a tradition. And I said, well, so was slavery. Get rid of this. It's just so insensitive. So anyway, so that's why I got a colonoscopy on national television.
And I think you have saved lives.
Yeah, and I still do it. I took Jimmy Kimmel to get a colonoscopy on his show. I asked Kevin Hart this year, but it was a hard pass. He said no. But I thought that would be really important, because in black men and women, it's deadlier, and it's really important. And it used to be that they needed to get screened at 45, and then the American Cancer Society lowered the age for everyone to 45. So if you have enjoyed this talk, you can, please talk to your doctor about getting screened, or anyone who's 45, please, because only 20% of people between the ages of 45 and 49 are getting screened, because I think a lot of people don't know the age was lowered. And, again, prevention, what is it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And with cancer, any cancer, that's certainly the case. I gave the commencement address at the University of Massachusetts Medical School a couple of years ago, And since it was near Boston, I said that I wanted to take Tom Brady to get a colonoscopy, and that a lot of people in Boston would like me to do it without anesthesia. Because he had just left. He had just left the, what are they called? What's the Boston football team? The Patriots. Yeah. Yeah.
You've also
Maybe I should go into stand-up. What do you think? Like cancer humor.
you've also been generous with sharing your own personal experience with breast cancer.
I know this is awkward because you're trying not to laugh, and we're talking about breast cancer. Yes,
But this is the magic. You are able to get through a really serious conversation with a smile on your face, and leave everybody with an important takeaway.
Well, thank you, Olivia. I was diagnosed about 3 years ago, and I love talking to people because I feel like I can impart some really important information for all of you. So I was diagnosed with stage 1A breast cancer, and that was pretty shocking. And I thought, gosh, I have no history of breast cancer in my family, but 80% of people who get breast cancer have no family history. And by the way, I always say no family history is no guarantee. Similarly, 75% of people who get colon cancer have no family history. Your family history, in other words, could start with you. So I was diagnosed, and I realized that 42% of women 40 and over have dense breasts. And if you have dense breasts, sometimes sorry guys, sorry to go into that, sometimes a mammogram isn't enough. Because as my breast radiologist describes it, if you have dense breasts, finding an abnormality, a tumor or some kind of thing that shouldn't be there, is like finding a snowball against a backdrop of snow. So if you are in that category, and now the U.S. Preventative Health Task Force requires all clinicians to notify women after they have had a mammogram that you have dense breasts and recommend they discuss it with their doctor, you may have to get additional screening. And so in the form of an MRI or an ultrasound. So it's just something to talk to your doctor about when you get your mammogram. Find out, A, if you have dense breasts, B, if you can get additional screening. And we're trying to get legislation passed called the Find It Early Act, which will require insurance companies to cover additional screening for women with dense breasts. And I think, I've thought a lot about this during my time in Bentonville and the idea of access, something that I know Alice Walton and the Walton family believes deeply in, making things available for everyone. And when I was being treated for breast cancer, Olivia, that's all I was thinking about. I was thinking about, here I am in one of the finest hospitals in the country, in New York City, with the best health care imaginable, with access to all these machines and all this technology and all this expertise with my doctor. My breast surgeon is a woman named Lisa Newman who works on health disparities. She's a black doctor, and do not listen to what Tucker Carlson says about black surgeons. He is full of S-H-I-T. That made me so mad. Did you see him? He went on a rant about if he had a black female surgeon, he knew that they got special treatment and didn't deserve to basically be where they were. It was so frustrating. But anyway, all I kept thinking about is people don't have access to quality health care, and we have to fix the health care system in this country. Your health should not be because of your zip code, right? And so that's all I kept thinking about, Olivia. And I so appreciate this idea of giving access to everyone in this community to this museum and to the health center that's about to open. It's so exciting. So important.
Maybe We're so proud of you, Alice. We are. She's so embarrassed right now. One last question before we open it up for questions. So you got this fabulous tour of the museum with Alice, which is so special, and I heard that you are collecting a bit of art today. What's that been like for you, and what kind of art calls to you?
Well, my husband, John, why don't you stand up and say hi to everybody, Molnar? Today is the, 14th anniversary of our first date. His brother David texted us, "Happy anniversary of your first date." I don't know how he remembers that, because I sure don't. But, I don't know that much about art. I was so heartened to hear Alice say how she really learned about art later in life and educated herself. And I can't tell you how thrilling it was to walk through Crystal Bridges. First of all, the architecture is so extraordinary, and then to see the whole array of art that was there. I'm really just learning, and I'm attracted to all kinds of art. John's parents are quite knowledgeable about art and started collecting in the 70s. They saved their money and bought a de Kooning. Pretty good, right? But I'm still learning and just honestly trying to soak it all in. But I'm not no art expert by any stretch. Do you collect? Or are you interested in any particular artists?
I am, but I would take up too much time talking about it. John had planted this question as well, and I think he was leading you toward Nick Cave. The thing you bought, the merging. I heard you're a Nick Cave fan.
Oh, yes, there's a really cool guy named Devon Rodriguez who I follow. Obviously, you think all I do is go on Instagram. Which is sort of true. But I followed Devon Rodriguez on Instagram. I reached out to him, and he goes down to the subway, and he travels around New York City. You all should follow him if you can. He's Puerto Rican. He was raised by his grandmother. He's never formally trained. And I bought a big painting that he did of all this cross-section of New Yorkers sitting on a bench at a subway station. The only bad thing is they're all looking at their phones, but it's such a great New York piece of art, and I would love to support emerging artists and people who haven't been recognized yet.
And with that, Marissa, I believe I've promised you. I know everyone has questions for Katie.
Yes. Everyone has questions for Katie. I'll read off 3 questions, and maybe, Katie, you can answer 1 or 2 of them. This question is from Suzanne. What suggestions do you have for people to critically consume media?
That's such a good question.
Yes, that's question number 1.
Okay.
Question number 2 is from Stevie. How did you know that you were born to be a journalist and a storyteller? And question number 3, is there a topic or story that you covered while working for a large national network that you would like to cover again now that you are on your own network with more journalistic freedom?
Okay, question 3 is too hard.
Okay.
So we're not going to do that because that requires me to remember too much. Question 1 is a really good question. And question 2, now I can't remember question 2. What was question 2?
Question 2 is, how did you know that you were born to be a journalist and a storyteller?
May I answer both of those? Do we have time? Okay, question 1 is so important. How can we consume news and information when so much misinformation is so rampant? And I was a co-chair of the Aspen Commission on Mis and Dis and Mal. Did you know there were so many information? And I think, the simple answer is consider the source. And what I do is I look at who is telling me information, and then I do research. If I see that it's some medical association, I'll look it up, and then I'll see maybe this medical association has an agenda. In other words, they feel very strongly about reproductive rights or very strongly about limiting reproductive rights. So I think you have to be a very conscientious consumer, and I think you need to, I do try to look at a breadth of news and information from different sources. It's hard now because I think some extreme sources are just too extreme, on both sides actually. So I really try to look critically at what I'm consuming, and I watch MSNBC sometimes. I'm not really addicted to cable news just because I prefer reading it on my phone and getting it that way. But, and then I try to see how Fox News is framing an issue. And I'll look critically at what they're saying and why, and what they might be omitting from their coverage. So I think, unfortunately, it takes a lot of work to be informed today. And it's exhausting. So the easiest thing I can tell you is just read Wake Up Call every morning. And listen to Next Question, my podcast. Now, and number two, you know, I think I've always loved people. I'm insatiably curious about the world, what makes people tick. I'm really interested in people's stories. And I think that my parents encouraged me. And my mom's motto, it sounds sort of obnoxious now, for all of us, there were 4 kids. My sister Emily died of pancreatic cancer. You all would have loved my sister Emily. She was a rising star in politics, and everyone said she would be the first female governor of Virginia. And she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer a couple of years after we lost Jay. But my mom, I think, who really didn't have an opportunity to have a career. You know, I think women of her generation didn't necessarily work. She raised us. She worked at the gift department of Lord & Taylor, and she volunteered at Planned Parenthood. And so my mom used to tell us, let them know you're there. And I'd say, what is she talking about? But I think what she was saying is, take up space. You know, don't be afraid to take up, obviously I'm not, take up space in a room to kind of be there and be strong and let people know what you think. And don't be a shrinking violet, you know, and have the confidence to have an opinion or to have a seat at the table. And I think my parents gave all of us a lot of confidence. And I think back on why that was, and I think because they loved us so unconditionally. You know, I never, ever doubted that my parents didn't want the best for me, wouldn't be there for me. And I feel so bad when people aren't lucky enough to have that kind of parenting. So I think if you love your kids, you know, I know you're having Dr. Becky on, and there's all sorts of, you know, gentle parenting and all that jazz. Have you seen the video of the baby boomer mom and the young woman saying, don't say I'm proud of you. Say you must be so proud of yourself. It is so funny. But I honestly think just loving your kids fiercely is the best thing you can do as a parent.
That's really beautiful, and now you get a chance to do it again. So as we wrap up, tell us a little bit about what it has been like to be a grandmother.
Well, it's so great. I mean, so I have 2 daughters, as I mentioned, Ellie, and I have also 2 stepchildren who I'm so lucky to have in my life. And John's daughter, Allie, just got engaged, which is very exciting. And he's got a great son, Henry, who's 30. And if anybody has any single women in New York who are really cute, somebody's raising their hand. Oh. A single guy, that, you know, hey, who knows? But
where does he live?
Sorry?
I said, where does he live?
He lives in New York City. But anyway, Ellie and Mark have, what's really great. I think that, first of all, they named their little boy Jay, which is so beautiful. And he's really cute. Of course, I think he's really cute. But I think the best part about being a grandparent for me is to watch my daughter transform into an extraordinary mother. And to see that, it's been really a joy. And then, but I don't want to ignore my other daughter, Carrie, because she'll feel like, well, why didn't you talk about me, even though she'll never watch this. She is actually, I'm very excited. She's a very unique person, and she is going to the University of Virginia, my alma mater, to get her PhD in history this fall. So if anybody knows any cute guys in Charlottesville, let me know. And also I have a niece in San Francisco. I am really trying to find her a boyfriend. She's fabulous. And she's having her 40th birthday, so let's get cracking.
Katie, thank you so much for being here.
This was so fun. Thank you all for coming.